Life after death. Wow, that is a huge subject to people. That is the underlying reason that a lot of people hold on to a faith, a belief system. But is what you have been taught and believe about life after death, if you are a Christian and if you base your beliefs upon this book, the Bible, is what you are holding your faith into and believing really taught in these pages? That is the question. The Old Testament lays the foundation for the New Testament. Jesus saying he came not to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. So we have to start looking there. This is where the creation of mankind took place in biblical terms. This is the story of Adam and Eve, what was held out to them, and then what took place and how we ended up with the New Testament, which testament means covenant. There was a covenant made with man originally and a covenant with the Israelites. And then we come to a point to where there was a new covenant. And so these teachings, we go back originally in Genesis, the creation account, and it's in itself a pretty telling story, if you will. In the first couple of chapters, and I gotta get beyond that part to where I get to Genesis here. This Bible has a lot of reference material in it. All right, so on the first day, we know the creation, what took place, and we get up to where man is being created. And I'm going to read exactly what took place between God and man, so that we can kind of see what's held out, what God's intent, what's the purpose here. So in the second chapter, the 19th verse, and God's already created everything else, and now he's time for man. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field, and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam, to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called them, every living creature, that was the name thereof. Of course, Adam didn't speak English, so to say cat or dog, it was not exactly the way that Adam would have named it. Anyway, Adam gave names to all the cattle and the fowls of the air, and so forth and so on. And then we reach a point to where Adam was put to sleep, and a deep sleep fell upon Adam, and as he slept, God took one of his ribs, then he closed up the flesh after he took the rib, and from the rib he made woman. And he said, therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto the wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, and the man and the wife were not ashamed. And then we get on to the third chapter, but there were commands that God had given Adam and Eve. And what were they supposed to do? They were supposed to take care of this garden, expand upon it, have children. Ultimately, the entire earth would have been a paradise. God had planted this one tree in the middle of the Garden of Eden, and their only negative that they were told was to abstain from eating of the fruit of this one tree, the tree of knowledge of good and bad. And of course, we know the serpent came along and tempted Eve, and there went the sin, original sin as it's called, took place. And God had told them, if you eat of this tree, you will positively die. The day you eat of this tree, you will positively die. And of course, this snake comes along and says, I'm telling you, you're not going to die. Now this is an interesting thing because in the original command to the original couple, God never said, you're going to lose your fleshly body and I'm going to send you to hell and you're going to burn forever if you eat of this fruit of this tree. That was never the words. And it was Satan who argued the point and threw out another take and said, you'll positively not die. You will note also that in the entirety of the Old Testament, which makes up a good portion of this book through Malachi, the nation of Israel did not hold out any hope, or there's nothing to indicate any belief in a life after death. It's not talked about, it's not discussed, never once brought up. That just was non-existent in the entire God's dealings with mankind, from creation all the way up to Jesus. Nothing about an afterlife, nothing about shooting up to heaven. Those kind of things did not exist. Especially in the 5 books of Moses. Now, there was justice, just as the example of Cain and Abel. God was happy with Abel. The next minute, Abel's dead. Cain, who God wasn't happy with, walks away. Seemingly to be a reward for doing good. I mean, the one that God had favor with gets killed, and the one that God disfavored walks away. So the world is not always fair, but ultimate justice would be at some point. Doesn't the Torah, the Old Testament, even talk about the afterlife, next world? The entirety of the Old Testament, the Torah, is focused on this world, this life. We get into all of that and no belief whatsoever, in no teaching at least in the Bible, to think that they live with this, I'm going to do good so that I get this reward in heaven bit. This did not exist until we get into the New Testament. And then we read carefully what was presented in the New Testament. John chapter 5, marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in which all that are in their graves shall hear his voice, and shall come forth, they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. I'm going to read some more here in a minute, but that alone presents an interesting concept, because many times someone's loved one died and you'll hear, oh, she's in heaven, she's in a better place, she's with Jesus, those kind of words. But that's not what the Bible teaches a resurrection. It doesn't teach your soul drifting away. Ecclesiastes, the soul that sinneth in itself shall die. When Noah built the ark, and they're bringing the animals into the ark, guess what the animals were called? Souls. Soul was life. Animals didn't possess a soul. In the creation of man again, and God formed man out of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. It doesn't say that God inserted a soul into this body. And we get this in the teachings of the New Testament as well, because we are talking about a resurrection and the hope of such a resurrection, which never existed until Jesus came, which would of course bring up the question of all those great prophets, Abraham, Moses, Isaac, David, all these people who died before Jesus' time. So when they died, what happened to them? What was their hope? They didn't have the Jesus story. They didn't have this redemptive, sacrificial lamb of Jesus to give them hope, something to believe in, to give them this heavenly hope. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't there. It did not exist until the New Testament. The word hell, which is an English translation, in the Hebrew scripture is translated from the Hebrew word Sheol. The word hell is used in the Greek text, the New Testament, is translated from the Greek word Hades. You go back and you look up the word Sheol and Hades, and both of these words mean grave. Everyone, according to the teachings of the Bible, that dies goes to this grave. Now, people will say, oh, but Jesus talked about just burning the pit and blah, blah, blah. Again, in a previous sermon, I used the word anachronistic. And going back to anachronism, meaning that going back to the setting of that time, not where we are now, but when this was written, outside the walls of Jerusalem, which everybody in Jesus' culture right there would have been very familiar with, everyone in that culture would have known about Gehenna. Outside the walls of Jerusalem, they kept a fire burning in this pit, much like we keep our garbage fields, dumps out here. We know that that's where the people that pick up our trash take our trash there. Well, outside the walls of Jerusalem, they had a place that they actually kept a fire burning, and the refuse, trash from the city, would continually be brought there, even to the point of paupers, criminals' bodies would be tossed in there and not given what we would term a proper burial. Jesus, in his talking about people that would be thrown into this lake of fire, was making an analogy with this. Gehenna, outside the walls of Jerusalem. People at that time that Jesus would have been talking to would have got it. It has morphed into something else over the last hundreds and couple of thousands of years, into something that is totally unrelated to what Jesus was trying to tell. In the book of Revelation, it talks about the second death. And it talks about this hell being thrown into the lake of fire. How do you take one burning, fiery pit and throw it into another burning, fiery pit? It makes absolutely no sense. The whole entire hellfire doctrine, if you will, is kind of like the rapture and the Trinity. Is just, there's no biblical foundation for this teaching at all. It is used and developed as a scare tactic, if you will. And it's interesting that the Jews, even to today, still don't have this concept that they worry about an afterlife, like the Christian does. And it makes a lot of difference when it comes to motivation, when you think about it. So if you're serving this God, and it's all based on trying to, I'm not going to take any chances because I don't want to burn forever. Well, do you not think that your God would kind of have a insight into your motivation, into your heart, to know what's happening? I mean, is that something that is hard for you to understand? Because Judaism have a different approach. They're not living in this fear. They believe that they're going to leave the next, that's up to God. I trust in God, I'm not worried about that. And they believe that they have work to do on this world now. And that they believe that work, of course, starts with themselves. Without this belief in the afterlife, some would say there's no justice. The Cains of the world would get away with murder. But by overemphasizing the importance of this afterlife over this life, we run the risk of belittling the sanctity and preciousness of life itself. What is the greatest gift that we've all received, if you will, from God? Would it not be our very existence, our very lives? So when we do things out of fear, and we already had talked about in earlier sermons the failure of the Mosaic law to keep the Israelites in line. God laid out these 600 some odd laws from the hand of God, perfect laws from the hand of God, correct? And through 3 different forms of government tried to rule over, to keep the Israelites in line with these laws, from the judges to the patriarchal wells first, and the judges, then the kings. And of course, at the end of the day, guess what? It failed because man could not live by these laws. Laws did not change the heart. It did not create the proper motivation. And again, we go back to Jesus and what his emphasis it was in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. And we go back to even what Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 13. And the last words that he wrote there, well, even before that, he wrote, if I had faith to move mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. What's he saying? He's saying that love is more important than faith. If I've got all this great faith that I can actually move mountains, I've got so much faith, but I do not have love, I am nothing. And then he later on, after those attributes of love are laid out, after that he says, of these 3, faith, hope, and love is the greatest. And of course, after those attributes are listed there in 1 Corinthians 13, he sums it up by saying, love conquers all. Motivation is very important. And for a God that sees all, knows all, and reads into the heart, motivation is ultimately important to your service and worship of this God, is it not? So, life after death is not what you have been taught it to be. Hell and Hades are not what you've been taught it to be. I challenge everyone that listens to any of my presentations here to do your own homework. And if these people whom you're studying and reading have a lot of words and very little reference to go with them, dig some more. It's very important. If you're saying that the words and teachings of this book are important to your eternity, then I'm saying know what's in this book, number 1. Number 2, it's about love. From A to Z, it's about love. You would never take and a friend of yours says, oh, I got just the guy for your daughter. He is perfect. Now, I'm sorry I don't have a picture of him, but I can tell you he's wonderful, hardworking, honest, caring, and they should be in love. Are you going to just go to your daughter and say, look, I got this letter from my friend, read about this guy, and fall in love with him? But that's what you're doing with God. You're falling in love with somebody that you don't know anything about, based on some words by men. You're not using your head. You would demand more of your daughter to know more about this man than you're demanding of yourself to know about your God. Love. That's the key. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you in a week.